So, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which sounds like the best title a 5-year-old could come up with, is in third person. Now, this feels like such a minor point to make an entire video over, but hear me out, because to me, this is almost as bad of a decision as naming this game Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Usually, most people don't care whether a game is in first or third person. The gameplay should match the vision of the developer. However, each style, whether first or third person, has its unique pros and cons, with some formats being better suited for certain genres than others. First-person games are usually shooters, but you'll also see survival horror games, VR games, and certain simulator games also being first-person for various reasons, but action-adventure games, which seems to be the genre of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, are almost always third-person. But for me, the issue isn't necessarily just with the gameplay, we'll get to that in a bit, but almost more so on the fact that third-person games let you actually see the character you're playing as for a lot more time than most first-person titles. Now, it does look like there will be cutscenes that will be more cinematic, where you'll actually see Indy's face, but these will only be like 10 to 20% of the actual game's playtime. For 90% of this premium Indiana Jones experience, you will not see much of Indiana Jones at all. Now, maybe this would work for another character or another IP, but he is the IP. It's why he's always wearing the same clothing, whether he's 35, 65, or 80. People are coming to see this, not this. Indy is what's appealing. The set pieces, the adventure, the side characters, they're all important, but seeing Indiana Jones with his hat, with his coat, with his body, this is what people care about. Otherwise, why even use the IP? Whether or not you or I care, that barely matters. I'm just surprised some executive at ZeniMax or Microsoft didn't say, hold on, we're paying Disney $1 trillion to use the Indiana Jones IP, and we're never gonna see Indiana Jones? Whose idea was this? Larry, where's my firing stick? People buying this game to see an Indiana Jones adventure are gonna want to see Indiana Jones have this adventure on screen. This isn't Far Cry, where the main character is, I don't know, fucking nobody, where the player won't care if they see him or not. This is Indiana Jones, one of the most iconic characters in pop culture history, and you're gonna hide him? He's had a lot of iconic looks too. I guess you're not really gonna see any of that in this game. Many third-person games give the character outfits depending on the setting. I guess we're not gonna see Indy do any of that? I can see why fans of this series, of this character, would be disappointed. Now, I don't want to seem like I care a ton about this. I really don't. If the game is good, then that's all that matters, but I was also somewhat struck by the response from the developer. Here's an article from IGN titled, "Indiana Jones in First Person Just Makes Sense. We don't need another Uncharted." Now, oddly enough, this guy, Matt Purslow, I guess he really likes first-person action-adventure games, because he also wrote an article talking about why the new Avatar game also needed to be in first person. You forgot an apostrophe here, Matt. I don't know much about this game. Maybe it also warrants its own article on IGN, but it's such an oddly specific topic for one guy to write 2 separate articles about. I don't know. So at one point in the trailer for this game, you see a spider crawl on Indy's hand, and Matt writes, "For me, though, the trailer's most striking image is that of Indy's sliding hand into a dark, narrow void, only for a tarantula to crawl out from the shadow and up his arm. It's a sequence that reflects a similar skin-crawling scene from Temple of Doom. But when seen from first person, the moment is even more unsettling. The perspective really does half convince your brain that this digital hand is your hand." Well, that's the problem, innit? This isn't Fallout or The Elder Scrolls, where your character is a blank slate whose journey and history are defined by you. This is Indiana Jones. I want to see him interact with the spider, not me. Now, I know that we're experiencing his story in a sense vicariously. The movies obviously do it well enough with the writing and the visuals, but you still actually see Indy in those movies. And I'm not even trying to discount a first-person perspective's potential to enhance a vicarious experience in certain games either, but for something like Indiana Jones, it just doesn't feel right. I don't know, from this article, hearing the response from the director of the game, it just feels like they wanted to stay in their comfort zone. Some of the previous games that this team has worked on, like the Riddick games or the recent Wolfenstein games, they're great examples of first-person gameplay done right. Game director Jörg Gustafsson said, "It also separates our game from many other action-adventure titles, making it a unique experience that you cannot find anywhere else. It's clearly something that works for them as developers, but to say this was the right call just because you're trying to be subversive or different or unique feels odd. And I mean, much of this article's word count is devoted to also saying that this prevents the game from feeling too much like Uncharted. But as someone who's a fan of both Uncharted and Indiana Jones, I don't feel like that's enough justification to make this first person. I truly think that the team developing this just prefers to work in first person. Pretty much everything that Gustafsson has worked on prior to this game has been a first person action title of some sort, except for Enclave here, which was a third person title. And honestly, it's not just because the character is Indiana Jones. I think that's honestly the biggest reason for me as to why this game should have been third person stylistically. He is who we're here to see. But there are genuine gameplay reasons as to why most action adventure games are in third person. The article cites Uncharted and Tomb Raider, but these aren't the only action adventure games that exist. Assassin's Creed, the 3D Zelda games, the Batman Arkham games, the God of War series, Red Dead and GTA, the Metal Gear Solid games, tons of individual games outside of any series, they're all third person. And it's harder to name examples of first-person action-adventure games. Looking at this ranking of the best action-adventure games from TheGamer.com, full disclosure, I have written for a sister publication of The Gamer, no affiliation today. Only one game on this list is strictly in first-person, and it's BioShock, which I wouldn't really classify as an action-adventure game in the way that most of these other games would be classified. It's a pretty standard first-person shooter game. Everything else on this list is third-person. Maybe Mirror's Edge? That just popped into my head. But most action-adventure games are third-person for a reason, and wanting to separate your game from many other action-adventure titles to create a unique experience doesn't feel like a very strong one in my opinion. First-person perspectives are great for shooters, and they do work really well for certain puzzle games. As mentioned here, Portal and the Talos Principle, two of my favorite puzzle games, work very well in third-person. But if I'm remembering correctly, the Talos Principle can actually be played in third-person, kind of like the Elder Scrolls or Fallout, where you can kind of swap whenever you like. I'd probably put The Witness, another fantastic first-person puzzle game, in this category as well. But for action-adventure games, where the gameplay is usually less measured and methodical compared to a puzzle game, and less focused on gunplay than most non-puzzle first-person games, the third-person perspective offers a lot of advantages. You get a wider field of view, allowing players to see more of the game world around their character, which is useful in games that require both platforming and puzzle-solving elements. It's also just a wee bit more cinematic feeling, which I think could arguably matter for an Indiana Jones game of this type. Among Raiders of the Lost Ark's 9 Academy Award nominations was the Oscar for Best Cinematography. So yeah, I guess Indiana Jones and the, I want to say Giant Circle, but it's the Great Circle, is gonna be in first person. I don't really understand it, but here we are. As for my overall thoughts on the trailer, I'm gonna be honest, I thought it looked not great. The animations looked stiff, the graphics looked like an early PS4 game, and we only saw like, what, 15 total seconds of gameplay in this alleged 3-minute gameplay trailer? I know a lot can change between a game's first trailer and its release, but this game is supposed to come out this year. I don't know. I hope it's good. I liked a lot of these guys' previous work. I like Indiana Jones, but so far I'm not really seeing a lot to give me much hope. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. But for action-adventure games, where the gameplay is usually less measured and methodical compared to a puzzle game, and less focused on gunplay than most non-puzzle first-person shooter games.